I love the NRSV, the New Revised Susan version. Now we'll be hearing, if you can turn the mic down a little bit, it's just too hot for me, thank you. Now we'll be hearing from the Gospel according to Luke, verses 38 through 42. Listen now for a word from God to the church this day. Now, as they went on their way, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him. She had a sister named Mary who sat at Jesus' feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things, but few things are needed. Indeed, only one. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." The wisdom of God for all people, the call of God for all who live. Thanks be to God. Please pray with me. Oh God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Abraham and Sarah host the strangers in that required act of hospitality, and lo and behold, it lands them a blessing. It seems like it's going to be week 3 of Hospitality 101, that consistent biblical ethic of caring for those who are most vulnerable in our midst. 3 weeks ago, we had Jesus reinforcing this ethic as he sends disciples out 2 by 2 with explicit instructions to rely only on the hospitality of strangers. Those who do not provide hospitality will be worse off than Sodom, he tells them, the city that was destroyed for its failure to provide hospitality. Last week, as you know, we had the Good Samaritan story, where religious authorities are challenged to love their neighbors, be they friends or enemies. Anyone who is in need is one who requires love and care. And now Abraham and Sarah, they host 3 strangers who in some mysterious way represent God. Their act of hospitality ends in a blessing so ridiculously improbable that Sarah can't help but laugh. And as you know, their son, Isaac, means laughter. So why does Jesus spoil the consistency of this whole hospitality arc by critiquing Martha for doing exactly what seems to be required, encouraged, or even commanded throughout the rest of all of these texts? Sarah bakes a bunch of cakes. Abraham gets a calf, milk and curds. They've got to be just as busy as Martha. The Good Samaritan tends to the wounds of the person left to die in a ditch, treats him with oil and wine, puts him on his own animal, brings him to an inn, and takes care of him, pays money to the innkeeper to arrange for his ongoing care. He is no less occupied than Martha. And those caring for the disciples that Jesus sends out 2 by 2 have to be just as busy. They've got house guests after all. They're supposed to be busy. Now, based on everything that I know about these hospitality themes, Martha is a model host, providing the kind of hospitality that will be the blessing, Jesus tells his disciples, that they will rely on. So his response is frankly irritating. "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things, but few things are needed. Indeed, only one. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." We don't get to hear Martha's response, but I know what mine would be. "Okay, Jesus. All right, Jesus. I'll come sit at your feet. You can fix your own dinner. Cold cuts are in the fridge. Mayo's on the shelf. You can sweep your own room, make your own bed, rooms in the closet. You can clean your own toilet. I'll be glad to come and sit here and listen to what you have to say." Now, maybe especially annoyed because I know what it takes to run a church. Not everybody gets the luxury of sitting and listening at every moment. I just gave an announcement about bring your own rubber gloves to clean the kitchen. Somebody has to set up the cookies and lemonade, usher at the door, put out the yoga mats, prepare the agenda for the committee meetings. Or maybe I am especially annoyed because as someone who is terrible at multitasking, I know what it takes to provide the kind of hospitality that Martha offers Jesus, and I simply cannot cook a good meal and sit at someone's feet at the same time. Something's got to give. Do you really want it to be the main course? Now, if I were in Martha's shoes, I'd probably just want a little bit of recognition from Jesus. Martha, this hospitality is amazing. You are truly a servant of the living God. Martha, you have outdone yourself with this hospitality. Thank you for this generous welcome. Martha, it's amazing the way you can chop vegetables, clean toilets, make the bed, bring me a glass of water, and still find time to study the Hebrew Scriptures. Thank you for setting the pattern for the rest of us. That would probably satisfy Martha. That's probably what many of us would like to hear. But Jesus' response is telling. Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things, but few things are needed. Indeed, only one. Only one thing is needed. It's not the food, or the clean house, or the tasks that we often associate with providing hospitality. It is the full attention given to the guest. That's what Jesus really wants. Our full attention, which is a very different way, I think, of thinking about hospitality. Our full attention. We often have guests who come to the church on Sundays and other days. All guests have needs, just like everyone. Some of those guests sometimes have material needs. And on the countless times that this comes up in committee meetings with deacons who are charged with leading the church's ministry of compassion, or the safety committee that thinks about the safety of all people who come through our doors, or the worship committee, I've observed that we often think about the tasks or the things associated with hospitality: bags of socks, bus passes, food, links to social service agencies, material supports. I wonder how those conversations might change if we thought about hospitality first as the attention that we give to every guest. Maybe thinking only about guests in relationship to what they might need can block us from receiving what it is they might have to offer. I wonder how it would change our sense of what counts as success in church. Not just butts in pews, as the clergy taught, or break-even budgets, but our full attention given to listening for God's leading together through our stories, through our experiences, through our study, and even the voices of our pain. I wonder how it could change the quality of your parenting or grandparenting, your marriages, your friendships, your leadership at work, the quality of your attention given to those whom you welcome into your life. Attention is a very valuable thing. In fact, some argue that it is the very thing that runs the economy today. Herbert Simon, a cognitive psychologist and Nobel-winning economist, first articulated the impact of the information age on the mind in his 1971 paper, Designing Organizations for an Information-Rich World. What information consumes is rather obvious, he wrote. It consumes the attention of its recipients. Hence, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. 1971. Now, I doubt that Simon could have imagined smartphones, TikTok, and Instagram, but he understood even then that the digital world would compete for the attention of its consumers. In a sense, the digital world seeks to consume the consumer. Now, I doubt Jesus was thinking forward to Instagram either, but he understood that at the root of relationship with God and human beings is the attention that we give to each other. I'd say it's at the root of most things that need improvement, personally and politically. You listen to people in neglected neighborhoods, what's needed is attention to what is actually happening there from people who have the power to do something about it. You listen to kids or parents in tug of wars that never seem to end, and what is often needed is deep attention to each other. You listen to wisdom from spiritual leaders about what leads to burnout in people's lives. It's often those of us who become driven by the need to prove ourselves in the eyes of God or others, neglecting that basic attention toward God. The economy seems to have correctly identified something that is absolutely true. Our attention is valuable, one of the most valuable things. Jesus seems to suggest that we should be careful about being too passive in how we spend it, careful not to let the busyness of our tasks, even when they are carried out in the service of things that are good and faithful and true, distract us from that one thing that is the most important, a real connection with God and with each other. Last week, about 20 people gathered in person, another 5 online, for a discussion about tyranny in our time. I'd say the conversation was both important and frustrating. Important because, well, we're all concerned about what's happening around us in this moment in history. And frustrating because while so many of us have a good vision for the way the world ought to be, none of us seems to know how to make it happen. Social movements, even though they were quite prevalent across the world in the 20th century, are very, very difficult to bring about. I found myself thinking deeply, much more deeply through the rest of the week. The conversation alongside these texts prompted my memory of Neil Postman's 1985 book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, in which Postman warned that the rise of television in the 20th century was reprioritizing images, speed, and emotional appeal over logic and depth that were part and parcel of the print-centered culture of books, newspapers, and pamphlets. That shift, he argued, not without some controversy, was leading to the trivialization of public discourse, politics, education, religion, and news, all becoming more about entertainment than substance. All this well before the ubiquity of the internet and its blessings and curses. Now, at the time, Postman compared 2 different utopian visions in his book. George Orwell's 1984, marked by repressive totalitarianism on the one hand, and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where people are controlled by distraction, pleasure, and triviality. At the time, Postman argued that we are much more like Huxley's vision than Orwell's, amusing ourselves to death. That's the title of the book. People will come to love their oppression, he wrote, to adore the technologies that undo their capacity to think. Now, it was depressing, of course, to discover what postmen could probably not have imagined in 1985, that we are living in a world marked by a combination now of Orwell and Huxley's dystopian visions. But in the middle of all this, I realized I was thinking deeply about all of these things. I was focused squarely on the world as it should be and how we ought to get ourselves there. And I got to that place of focus on those things that I do care about deeply, not simply by scrolling compulsively or by sitting passively, but through giving my attention, my full attention, to many of you who are a part of this community and also care deeply about these things. Your leadership here, those elected by you, like those on the sessions and the diaconate, or those called to serve you, like me and other members of the staff, we think deeply. We think deeply about what we should do to push ourselves to meet this moment in time. Often we wrestle over what programs, events, and actions we should prioritize. But there is an earlier step that I'm always convinced we should be prioritizing. It is the one that an action-oriented congregation can easily overlook. And that is quite simply to keep listening. Some rightly call this the organizing culture, but I think it's much deeper than that. To me, it is the spiritual life. The prayer of the contemplative is essentially an attention to the omnipresence of God, writes Richard Moore. God is everywhere. God is omnipresent, not as a theological doctrine, he writes, but as the great silence that is present in every moment, but from which we are usually distracted by an overactive mind that refuses to wait in a humble unknowing for a pure wisdom from above. We are usually distracted by an overactive mind that refuses to wait in a humble unknowing for a pure wisdom from above. Rohr, of course, would want us to develop disciplines of individual contemplation, and I'm all for that. But I think these texts today suggest that being fully present to each other is also an important path toward waiting in that humble unknowing for pure wisdom from above. You could say, in a way, that's what the church is. A group of people committed to investing their time in being present to each other and to the world, trusting that this focused, benevolent, loving attention toward the world and its creatures is how God meets us with blessings that we all need. We all need to meet whatever moment we are in. If that is true, then we can trust that the wisdom to meet this moment, it will arrive. We just have to stay focused on our listening. Listening to each other, listening to our neighbors, listening to creation crying out, prepared to meet God, receiving her blessings and difficult assignments. that come about in all of these encounters.